Good morning, everyone. As Mary shared, I'm Corey Brumba with Myron Construction, and I'm very happy to be with all of you here today. I have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, but before I do, let me take a moment to celebrate the remarkable community many of us get to live, work, and play here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. This vibrant and dynamic city, already packed with positivity and growth, is on the cusp of an exhilarating transformation. As April 2025 approaches, we eagerly anticipate the arrival of the NFL Draft, which promises to be an unprecedented level of busyness, excitement, and activity in our beloved Titletown. What was once a proposal and an idea in 2016 is becoming reality thanks to the diligent work and careful planning of Mark Murphy and the tremendous Green Bay Packer organization. The Packers and the greater Green Bay community have truly shown their dedication and commitment to this community in pursuit and now the execution of the NFL Draft. Members of our team had the opportunity to visit Detroit and witness firsthand the transformative impact this event can have on a community. We are immensely proud to be the official provider of construction services for the Green Bay Packers, for Lambeau Field, and all of the other structures that we've constructed in this area, all the way from the Resch Expo Center to Titletown to the Green Bay Visitor Center. It all played a very pivotal role in getting the NFL Draft here and securing this prestigious event for our community. It will definitely ensure the draft attendees will have an unforgettable experience in just under a year. All of this construction wouldn't have been made possible without New North. New North has been in the forefront of innovation and economic growth, what you just saw in the video, for our area and local businesses. Myron is proud to be a longtime supporter of the impactful work that New North continues to execute. Our first keynote speaker today is a trailblazer in the tech industry, serving as the corporate vice president and lead for Microsoft Philanthropies. Mary Snapp joined Microsoft in 1988 as its fourth attorney and its first female attorney. She brings her experience and perspective from over 35 years at Microsoft to lead strategic initiatives. Mary is a frequent speaker on issues related to Microsoft's corporate and social responsibility, technology policy, and AI. She is also instrumental in the pilot of Northeast Wisconsin's New News Lab, which I'm sure we're going to hear about from Mary here shortly, which was launched in 2021 to preserve local journalism and amplify the stories of our region. Mary grew up in Newton, Kansas, where she still has close family and graduated from the University of Kansas School of Journalism before earning her law degree at the University of Michigan. But before we bring Mary up on stage, we have a video that everybody can watch on Brad Smith from Microsoft.
Today I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, in front of Lambeau Field, the storied home of the Green Bay Packers, just up the highway from Appleton, where I grew up. This region has an interesting history that really combines resilience and entrepreneurship and innovation. In some ways, it started when the price of wheat fell and farmers had to find a new path to prosperity. One individual, Austin Hoffman, had a great idea. It was to turn the neighboring trees into paper and build the paper industry, which ultimately flourished here. He literally went door to door to door, selling shares in his company for $100 a piece. But he needed more than money. He needed a new idea. He turned not to new trees, but to recycled materials like newspapers and rags. He put money and that idea together, and his company, the Fort Howard Paper Company, became one of the pillars of the industry. Almost a century later, there is a new spirit of innovation right here across the street from Lambeau Field in the Titletown district, including Titletown Tech. It was founded 5 years ago by the Packers and Microsoft, not only to fund, but to help and support the founders and entrepreneurs of our day. Like synthetic, demi-plated pork farms, impacting everything from the way we grow and eat food, to play games, to use AI. We're celebrating the 5th anniversary by launching an even bigger venture capital fund that will fuel even more new companies. Titletown Tech reflects another aspect of the Green Bay Packers, the only community-owned team in the National Football League. That same spirit of community is at the heart of Titletown Tech. The story of innovation is always a story about people. People who have great ideas, who need the support of a community to turn their vision into a new reality. It's what is building the future, not just for northeastern Wisconsin, but for this entire state, the country, and the world.
Thanks, everyone. It is just such a pleasure to be here today. And I want to thank Michelle for all of the energy and the wisdom and the connections that she brings to this region between Green Bay, actually, and Microsoft back in Redmond, Washington. It's just a pleasure to work with you, Michelle. And I actually want to thank the organizers of the event today for the reminder about D-Day. As the color guard was coming up, I was reminded of my father, who came through Normandy 6 months after D-Day, about on Thanksgiving, actually, had about 2 weeks on the ground from some very fast basic training in that period, 1944, to fight in the Battle of the Bulge over Christmas time. So thank you for just a moment to remember my dad. Such a pleasure to be here. Brad Smith was here just a couple of weeks ago, as many of you know, to make some announcements. I've been here since Monday evening. I brought the corporate sponsors board for FFA. Many of you know FFA? Yeah, some nods. Used to be Future Farmers of America, but we're broader than farmers now. I chair the corporate sponsors board. We brought executives from John Deere, from Ford Motor Company, from Corteva, from Lincoln Electric, from Nutrien, from BASF, and we showed them Titletown Tech. And we showed them just the amazing entrepreneurialism that exists in this region. Of course, we ended with a tour of Lambeau Field, so they thought that was pretty cool too. But I'm just so proud to bring this network of folks to experience Green Bay for the first time, many of whom never had before. So my pleasure to do that and to be with you today. And now let's get to it. So I want to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. This was a cover that appeared on The Economist. You know, you've got the angel and the devil. I think we prefer to talk about it as the opportunity for artificial intelligence to be both a tool and a weapon. And you probably haven't really thought too much about it, but you've been using artificial intelligence now for 10 or 15 years. When you plug in and ask for directions in your car, when you do a search on your phone, you're using artificial intelligence. But what happened in November 30, 2022 was the launch of generative AI, and that's what sort of took the world by storm. That's what got people really excited about both the promise and the perils of artificial intelligence. So I wanted to take just a minute to talk about some basic differences between artificial intelligence that you all have been using and generative AI, which I'm guessing now that virtually all of you are using, at least to do various searches or to create a Word document or to summarize some meeting notes. So if you think about artificial intelligence in its early days, it was very organized. It was very structured into data sets. And you would query that data set, and it would return a specific answer that was organized in rows and columns. Generative AI is very, very different. It does not use data sets. Instead, it uses a network of words that are gathered from databases all around the world. You're most likely thinking about the internet, and yes, that's really true. So when you use generative AI, you're in a world of connections and networks. It's still math and it's still statistics, but it's networks. And it gets better and better as you use it more and more and learns better what sorts of connections are most predictable to be that next word, to create that next sentence. So to use a really simple example, I got up this morning, I look out my great hotel room at the Kohler Lodge. I say, boy, I look out this window and I see a blue, what would you say? Sky. I hear some people say sky. Yeah, that's a good one. But if I were to say, I got up this morning, I looked out my window, I then looked towards the ground and I saw a blue, what would you say? What? What? I can't hear. Car. Car's good. Car's good. I like flower myself. I saw a blue flower. I blow a blue hat. You could say you saw a blue hat, if I was on the third floor looking down. And the more you query and the more often the answer is known to be right, the better that gets. So you see, it is an iterative process, so it makes mistakes. And it will get better and better, but it makes mistakes. And that is the concern. That and just the ability to do the queries of this vast amount of data for really good purposes, and then maybe some that we really wish people and governments, frankly, wouldn't do. So that's sort of the big difference in this time frame. But let's talk about why it's important. One of the reasons it's really important is that we know that innovation really spurs growth in our domestic product. And here on the screen, you can see over time some innovations along the way, starting with the printing press. And you can see sort of a hockey stick, really, in terms of the growth of our GDP and technology innovations, with AI there at the very, very top. Now, artificial intelligence, the generative AI, once launched, had 100 million users within the first 3 months. The fastest adoption of any major technology that we've seen. So we see innovation, we see broad adoption, and now we really need to think about how we use it in a responsible way. But before we could talk just very briefly about that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the great stuff happening here in Wisconsin. As you know, Brad, my boss Brad, was here a couple of weeks ago, and in Racine, Wisconsin, announced the building and construction of a new data center right here in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. This will be a $3.3 billion investment in this region over the next 2 to 3 years, which will create construction jobs, but then ongoing 2,000 permanent jobs in this region. And as exciting as that is, I have to say, it would not have happened without all of you. There are places around the world where we would like to build a data center, and 4 years later, we would still like to build that data center. And it's because of government policies, permitting, resources, those kinds of things. Actually, the way the government sometimes addresses fundamental human rights. You all cleared that permitting process, I think, in about 60 days. Michelle's nodding, 60 days. That's never happened before. I mean, that has never happened before. And that's really you, the people in this room. But let me give you a little sense of what that's going to be like. I had the opportunity to visit a data center a couple of months ago. This one happened to be in Dublin, Ireland. I'd never been in a data center before, and all this time I've been at Microsoft, because they are highly, highly secure. And when they take people through, it takes away from their business. And so they're very careful about who and how to get into a data center. I will tell you, you've all been in places where you have to go through security. Recently, I had the privilege to take a tour of the Pentagon. Nowhere close to the security to get into the data center. Nowhere even close. My shoes were scanned, my watch was scanned, everything out of the pockets, I was wanded. And then on the way out of the data center, exactly the same process. So this is a highly, highly secure facility, both outside, obviously outside, and then even internally in terms of how we manage that data center. Once you get here, and this facility was, I think they said about the acres and acres, but about 70, 80 football fields stacked back to back to back, about 4 stories high. But inside the data center, and you see we're here on the roof. Inside the data center, a very different story. Inside the data center, there are miles and miles and miles of cables no thicker than a pencil. Each of those cables goes into a slot. Each of those cables is marked. The people who are in the data center know exactly where an individual cable among a building that is 70 football fields goes into a particular server to serve a customer who has a data load that it once analyzed. So the level of scale on the outside and the precision on the inside was just remarkable to me. Also, heat control, light control, pollution control was tracked to a T from an operations center at the corner of the building in the data center. So it is a massive undertaking with unbelievable delicate precision on the inside to manage the work. What this means together is that data centers are being built around the world. Even though we don't talk a lot about the numbers, we're probably at a rate now we have, I would say, around 350 or so data centers around the world. The one in Mount Pleasant will be one of the most modern and the largest in the entire world. When you think about it, Microsoft is a different company than it used to be. Microsoft this year will spend $60 billion on capital expenditures to build data centers and to manage data centers. That is $15 billion a quarter. We will spend more money on capital expenditures than we will expend on R&D and people and talent for the first time in our 50-year history. And across the world, there will be about $200 billion spent on data centers when you add in the work also being done by Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft together. So this is a massive undertaking. Now, you might be asking, with these data centers, are we worried about sustainability? And the answer is absolutely yes. The good news is that while the world's data load increased ninefold between 2010 and 2020, the amount of electricity needed to fuel those data centers increased by only 10%. And that is because of a factor of increased efficiencies, increased use of renewable energy. And it is absolutely important for us to continue to think about that as a major company, but also in every individual community and location where we are. So if we think about Microsoft and our sustainability pillars, our goal set forth 3 or 4 years ago was to be carbon neutral by 2030 in all of our operations, what we do, and then our vendors, called Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions, and to offset all of the greenhouse gas emissions that we have created since our founding by 2050. Now, we set that goal 3 or 4 years ago. That was before this huge undertaking with data centers, which take a fair bit of electricity. Today, just 1% of the world's supply. The question will be how much more? And when we think about that, it's important to think about 3 things. First, how many more data centers there's going to be around the world and the consumption. The second is how fast we can decarbonize the grid, how fast we can go to solar, water, other kinds of renewable energy. And the third, which you may not think about, is how can we use artificial intelligence itself to actually create innovation, to create efficiencies in data centers. Here in Wisconsin, our data center will be undertaking a project with the National Renewables Grid to create solar power that will help to fuel much of the data center operation, but will also be large enough to fuel about 30 million homes by the time it's constructed in 2027. In addition to that, this data center will use what's called closed loop heating. So that means that once we get going, all of the water that we used for closed loop cooling All of the water that will be used will be recycled over and over again so that we need not use that valuable and precious water supply. So it's very important for us to think about these kinds of sustainability issues. But now we've talked about what the data center is, how you kind of get started with thinking about artificial intelligence. I want to talk a little bit about the technology itself. And artificial intelligence is what we call a general purpose technology. You'll see some examples on the screen of what others of those have been. The printing press in the 1400s, the steam engine in the 1800s, electricity, and the internet. By general purpose technologies, I mean can be used for many, many different kinds of businesses and innovations. You contrast that with a single purpose technology. I was thinking about what would be a great example of that. Well, this microphone is kind of a single purpose technology. I don't see a lot of other use for it other than, kind of what I'm doing now. Then I thought about my kitchen. I'm a baker and a cook, and I love to cook. My kitchen is a myriad of single-use tools. I mean, you all think about it, those who cook. I've got my lemon squeezer. Okay, maybe limes can be included. I have a juicer. A juicer. I have a zester. I have a cake tester. That thing can only be used for one thing. And then I thought about my favorite single-use technology. That's my egg cooker. Cost about $15. Put 6 eggs in there. Turn on the button. 8 minutes later, I got a hard-boiled egg. I cannot imagine another use for that egg cooker, but I can't live without it either. So those are single-use technologies. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about broad-based use of artificial intelligence across many sectors, many products, many services. So let's take just a couple quick examples actually. I'm going to talk just for a minute about the printing press. As my boss Brad Smith says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So I want to talk a little bit about some of this technology. The printing press was founded or created by Gutenberg in around 1450. And in 1450, there was only one place where there was a printing press. And that period of time, there were about 8,000 books produced every 1,000 years. 50 years later, you can see the proliferation of printing presses, 8,000 books produced in just 10 years. So rapid growth of technology. And with that rapid growth, not only was there an amazing diffusion of information and knowledge, which created more innovation, but there also was an economy, a full economy created around the printing press. You can see here there were bookbinders, there was ink, there was the paper example we saw with Fort Howard, there were people who published, there were people who actually created the newspapers and the infrastructures of those kinds of presses, and the writers and the creators at the end. So it created an economy across a number of different industries. Another example, which is actually a little bit different, but I want to talk about it too, is electricity. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb in 1879. The light bulb didn't exactly wasn't exactly diffused immediately across, at least in the United States. 50 years after the creation of the light bulb in 1930, only about 1 in 10 rural families had access to electricity. And then about 5 years later, the Roosevelt administration created the Rural Electrification Administration, which enabled the generation of electricity and then the distribution of electricity, which you see with the wires that are in this slide. And so then you have that infrastructure in place. You have to actually then adopt it. People have to end up using it. So around that same time, the REA hired a woman named Louise Ann Mamer, whose job it was to travel around to rural communities and talk to rural women about the benefits of electricity for their washing machine, for their refrigerator, for their sewing machines. And then just about 20 years later, as the poster shows, rural women said, in true Midwest humility, It's fine for us, and had caught up to their urban counterparts in just 30 years in terms of the adoption and the use of electricity. Now, artificial intelligence and what we're talking about here not only is a general purpose technology, and you can see here a number of applications, whether it's agriculture, whether it's medical, whether it's business, whether it's education, across the board, but it is also creating a new economy, just as the printing press did. We've talked about some of the building blocks. We've talked about electricity. Earlier, we talked about broadband. We talked about data centers. That's all the stuff that is really expensive. That's infrastructure. But once those things are in place and you've got supply, chips would be another one of those things there to get us the compute power. Once you get that, the technology can be diffused very, very broadly. So that a startup, maybe over at Titletown Tech, with a great idea, a couple of really smart people, and maybe $100,000 in seed money, can have a new product to have a new solution for the use of artificial intelligence and potentially generative AI. So it is another example, like electricity, of something where once you get that infrastructure together, which is what's happening now, then the various uses of the technology are really, really, some not imagined. And it will be just such amazing. But what is needed for all of that? We need to have talent. We need to have people who know how to build, develop, and use the technology. I love this slide because these are real people. You know, it's not, I mean, I know stock people are real too, but that's not what I mean. These are 4-H kids where Microsoft has a partnership with tech change makers where kids learn to use technology in their 4-H club in some fashion, in a way that works for their club, and then commit to teach adults in their community what they've learned. And these are examples of 2 young people who've done that. On the other side is, I think it's from Mississippi, a teacher who is learning to use technology so that she can transfer that into her classroom. Right here, you've got some great examples of programs that are doing a wonderful job in skilling people. Gateway Technical College will be skilling thousands of workers in this area. Generator, an amazing organization with an amazingly creative founder, is also working to skill adults in AI and enable them to take really great jobs in the future. In addition to that, United Way is doing great programs to do LinkedIn Learning and other Microsoft MS Learn to teach certificate programs for young adults and learners across their career journey in this Northeast Wisconsin region. But there are roles ongoing, not just the nonprofit sector, but also in the private sector as well. Michelle was telling me as I was preparing to come that a recent survey done in Wisconsin noted that only about 53% of manufacturers in this region, in the state, believed that AI would impact their jobs and impact their manufacturing. I would argue that it's impacting it already today. They just may not be thinking about the ways in which it is. But that means that workers in these manufacturing industries also need to be equipped with skills to enable that continuous learning. In December, Microsoft announced a partnership with the AFL-CIO. And with that partnership, the goal is to provide curriculum to create AI skilling programs for labor union workers, labor union members, to really work to hear labor's voice and how we develop the technology, and to work with labor to create policies that will ensure that labor will not be left behind as we move into this new technology. So it will, again, be needed, the training will be needed and skilling across the spectrum. And you all are doing just a great job at that. I recently learned here about the Connected Systems Institute, recently announced at UW-Milwaukee, a great partnership with Titletown Tech. About 60 companies will be able to go through that a year. A couple days ago, I met the new executive director of that group. She just came over forget her name. She came over from doing disruptive technology development at Kohler. Man, what a job she has. And of course, who recruited her? Craig Dickman, Jill Enos, Cordero Barkley over at Titletown Tech. So very excited about what the Connective Systems Institute will do for that sort of skilling and training into the future. But we all know that none of this happens without the community and the partnership that it comes. So we know that we in the private sector, we create new products. The nonprofit sector, and I'd argue the research and the academic sector, incubates new solutions for that, but bringing it to scale, that's often the public sector. What you all are doing here with New North is really melding that. And boy, yesterday when I was with the FFA folks, Rebecca Duchesne came and talked to us, and I got a firsthand view of what an amazing set of leaders you have, in addition to Barb Lemieux, and the connected tissue that New North brings to this region. Titletown Tech, oh my goodness. We had a chance to hear from Alex Tink here at Fork Farms, and Corey Jaslowski, probably didn't say that quite right, Jasklowski, from Rake, who's doing some unbelievable work with imaging and artificial intelligence, really bringing that sense of entrepreneurship here to Titletown Tech, which now has raised $100 million in venture funding for about 35 startups, many of whom are located right here in Green Bay. And then, of course, the facility we're in today, Lambeau Field. What an amazing convening power this building has for this community, for events like this, and for hundreds and hundreds of other events across the year to bring community together. And I know we talked a little bit about the new News Lab. I will just say the power of journalism, not only to share information, but to bring a community together, to give you all a sense of values and connectedness, is absolutely important to a community, and I would argue a democracy. And finally, can't say anything without, end without talking about the Packers. That tour of Lambeau Field, yesterday we had the Lions, we had the Bears, we had the Dolphins fans, and yet every single one of them at the end of the tour screamed the chant, "Go Pack, go," every single one of them. Talk about the power of community. Let me just end by saying artificial intelligence does have tremendous potential. But there are concerns. And we need to be at the forefront of that. We need to recognize when regulation is needed. Microsoft is not elected. You all are elected. You talk to your policymakers. We recognize that there should be responsible uses of AI. There should be safety breaks in some cases where we decide that there are things that AI should not be allowed to do. Let's use the community and the partnership you have to bridge those two things, to bridge together, to understand the values, the principles, the things that make us human, not robotic, human. Bring those values together to harness the positive potential of artificial intelligence for this community, the state, the nation, and the world. Thank you very much.